My name's Joy Bonaguro, and this is Jason Lally, and we both work in the Open Data program and actually many other things in City and County of San Francisco. Yep, woo! Just wanted to tell you a little story about when I started at the city. I have a design background, and I came to City Hall, and I had just left my previous job where in my office I had this giant whiteboard. And then in the adjacent space next door, I had an even bigger whiteboard. And then in the hallway, we had painted chalk everywhere. And so I lived and breathed through whiteboarding. Anything we'd start talking about, but I would step up to the whiteboard, start writing it down, because I've just learned, people don't actually agree until they see something visually in front of them. And so with that in mind, we decided to recreate what happened to me when I got to City Hall in San Francisco, which was there were no whiteboards anywhere. There's one that's about the size of that paper, and it's not very helpful. One that's too tall for me because I'm short. And so I started to get very creative about creating whiteboard space in the city. And we have whiteboard sticky notes everywhere. I've tried to petition to be able to, whiteboard on the marble walls of City Hall. I haven't been able to sell that option. But you are now going to experience what it's like for us doing whiteboarding. And what you're going to find, you can still do good design even if you don't have whiteboards. So, all right, journey mapping. Let me make sure this is on. So I come from a background in design and have used a lot of techniques through the years. And some of you might be familiar with, oh dear. I don't think it's working. There we go. Who here has heard of service blueprinting? 2 hands? Oh, we could have done this on service blueprinting. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you quickly through what service blueprinting is. Oh, now it's too active. Here we go. Service blueprinting, there's actually a wonderful original white paper on this. I put the title there by Mary Jo Bittner et al. And really, service blueprinting was a way to structure a service that you're offering and design it and to break that service off into pieces. So at the top, you have physical evidence. So let's say I receive a notice or an email or something. There's some kind of artifact that I receive after I take an action. Perhaps I sign up for something and then something is sent to me. And there's this line of interaction the customer has with your service provider. That could be at the website, that could be in person, it could be any number of things. But then behind, as an employee or a contact, I might respond to your questions, or I might be at the service desk handing you a paper, and that all happens at the line of visibility. And then after the line of visibility, there's all this backstage and systems and actions and business processes happening. And service blueprinting, if you're not familiar with it, it's an excellent tool. I don't need to teach you how to do service blueprinting. You can go out there and Google, and there's so many things and services. And we use service blueprinting all the time in developing our services. So, for example, here's our publishing blueprint that we found a reasonably sized whiteboard. Not as big as we would have liked. And what we talked through was that there's actually a series of phases and choices and a service for in our case, departments that are wishing to publish open data. And so here's the digitized version. Actually, that's not showing up well, so I'll go back to here, where essentially we have, someone decides to publish. And then they go to Data SF, hopefully. And then they learn how to publish, and then they prepare to publish, and then they're sort of waiting for next steps because they've submitted a packet that we've provided them for, and then they end up eventually preparing the data on SF, and then they approve it for publishing, and it goes out there. So what we do is we use service blueprinting to design the services we have to offer. In this case, services to our publishers about how to go about publishing, and we really think of it as a service we offer. And so you can actually view the data publisher journey where we have essentially at the top are all the artifacts of what's happening throughout the entire journey to publishing a data set. And then, of course, we use this service blueprinting exercise to design the service and then create artifacts, or, for example, the publishing portal where people can go on and learn how to publish, and we try to break it into steps and phases and create predictability for the users. So service blueprinting is something that is really powerful to use when you're designing new services, Or you want to improve or redesign an existing one, right? So maybe there's too many systems involved, or there's too many steps that you're forcing your customer to go through. Or to just regain control and understanding. Sometimes we have lots of services, especially in government, that no one's actually mapped. And so service blueprinting can allow you to see not only the customer experience, but the staff experience, as well as the back-end systems. And so they're very, very powerful for this. But how to identify new services? And this is where we use a tool we call journey mapping, and you'll be actually using this tool today. Journey mapping has its origins in marketing, where they called it the customer funnel or the marketing funnel, where you basically went through phases like awareness of a brand. And it's all about brands. Like, you're aware of Coca-Cola. You're aware of, BMW. And then you're familiar with it. And then you start to consider and compare it to other brands. And then you make a purchase, and then it's about customer loyalty. So in this sort of background where journey mapping came from, it's a lot of it's all about branding and marketing and touch points. And since then, some people have talked about, instead of the funnel towards a purchase, the circle to a purchase, because brands are becoming very diluted in our day and age. Here's an example of a journey map from the marketing sphere. So it usually starts with a persona, like the young families, and what does this persona look like? You see those same phases they mentioned, like awareness, research, choice reduction, and purchase. What are they trying to do in each of these phases? And then here we see their touch point map. So this is where the marketers get into thinking, okay, how can we touch the user, and how will they know about us? We have all these different channels to reach out to them. And then a lot of journey maps, and people have many, many variations. You can Google this. You can come up with your own variation, where it talks about the emotions they're feeling through the different phases of it. And actually, emotion's a very powerful thing to capture, right? Because if someone's frustrated, if you can make their life easier, you've made a new friend. And here's another example. This one's Sarah's broadband provider journey. So it's like, what's going on? Someone's moving to a new home. How are they going to get hooked up with broadband? And here they have lots of thoughts and feelings as they move through the inquiry, the comparison, the purchase, and the installation phases. And what's going on in each of these? What is the emotional experience that they're talking about? And of course, you can see the origins in marketing. How do people feel about it? What are their emotions? What are they seeing out there? So we've taken that model, and we've sort of come up with our own interpretation of journey mapping. So we retain the idea of phases, but we come up with a different set of phases that we label. Hi guys, come on in, there's seats everywhere. And what we ask through those phases is similar to the customer journey. How does this happen? What is happening with the user? What's going on in this phase? We ask ourselves, how do we support this phase of their journey right now? And then we ask, how do our users know about the services and supports we're offering? Because there's usually a big gap there, we found. And then we thought, how can we better support them? So here's an example where when I came into the city, there was a lot of interest in starting STAT programs. Has anyone heard what a STAT program is? Someone want to give me a brief explanation? Okay, I saw like 3 hands up.
How'd you spell it? STAT.
I'll take a crack at it. So a STAT program is a tool for assessing progress against a goal, usually through relentless follow-up. You bring everyone together, sometimes on a multifaceted issue, sometimes on a specific issue. Get the stakeholders in the room, get them to agree on a plan of action, report back on a very regular basis about what steps were made towards that action.
And it uses data, which is why I care about it. So what we learned is, okay, we did an exercise where we called it Journey to a STAT program, and we took it from the leadership perspective. And what we did, and this is us getting creative with lack of whiteboards, which you'll be doing soon. And we sat down and we got all the relevant people, folks who had helped people start STAT programs, people who had consulted on it, people who had done STAT programs, and we got them in a room and we lined up our questions from here. How does it happen? What's happening with the user? How do we support this now? At the time, we weren't supporting it, so we really couldn't answer those 2 middle ones. So we brainstormed about how can we better support it. And at the time that we did this, what we had spent the past year doing was building something we called the Sap Starter Kit, which was a series of resources and tools for starting your own stat program so departments could come to those resources and use them in leveraging their program. And here's our beautifully digitized version of that exercise. And essentially, the phases we move through, interest is sparked, and somehow the leader hears about a stat program. Maybe they hear it coincidentally, they read an article, something like that. They often would hear about DPW stat, which is one of the stat programs in the city, but somehow a leadership interest is sparked. And it's completely ad hoc how that happens. So immediately we're like, wait, how could we make this less ad hoc and actually systematic? And so we decided increase marketing awareness of existing programs and resources, start doing brown bags, all sorts of things. And then after their interest is sparked, they tend to delegate to investigate further. They usually hand it off to a deputy or their CFO, like, what's this about? Look into it and report back to me. And then that person either does or delegates, and they go through the learning phase where they come up to speed on it. And that's one where we're like, oh, we've been supporting, we think we've figured out how to support part of the learning phase with our Stat Starter Kit. And then they try to find a starting point, a hook, a gentle way into a stat program. And then they create a work plan, they start experimenting, and they formalize a subset. And then after they do it in one area, they tend to expand and diffuse the practice throughout other parts of the department. And that sort of tends to be the journey to a robust stat program in the city. And so what we did was we brainstormed, how can we better support this journey and make this journey happen for more folks? And we essentially started to prioritize based on that. So you can't read it here, but the ones that are in black, things that we're already doing, and then immediate term, things we want to go right away. So we were like, wait, we put together all these materials, but they're in a report repository, and they're not thematically linked, and no one will ever find them and see them cohesively. And then this year, we were able to prioritize what we were doing and then identify things for the future. And for example, this is the Stat Starter Kit. So we published it, we took all the materials we had spent time and effort developing, and we put them and packaged them together. And right now we're working on our consulting and our service model to support the stat program, as well as the marketing. And then we're also we're offering classes on how to create a stat program and establish it. So by doing that journey mapping, we were able to identify a whole slew of new services that we could package around the journey to a stat program to make it better. So now it's activity time. I'm not going to talk to you. There's a reason why there's these little things around. We have a savvy analyst. Who should we call her? Joni. Joni. We have a savvy analyst, Joni. She has a problem to study. Let's help her. Okay, so here's the setup. We have a savvy city analyst. This is someone who's asked to analyze a challenge in the city. I decided not to give you a challenge. You can make up your own challenge. If you don't work in the city, try to pretend you do. Your task is to conduct an analysis on some issue and write a report. So what I would like everyone to do is for 5 to 10 minutes by yourself. If you don't have pen and paper, you can steal pieces of this and map out what you think the major phases are to doing an analysis and writing a report, and then answer the questions up here in each phase. We'll be going around, and depending on how the pacing is going, we'll cut off, and then we'll ask you to convene with your new friends and neighbors, at least within your row, and you're going to present to each other your journey map, and then try to use all the various, we've got one here, one there, one there. We've got a bunch of these, and they're sticky ones, so you should be able to take them out and put them on the wall. So you're going to make a team journey map, and then we're going to pick out a few people to present after that, and then walk through the journey map a little bit that we created on exactly this, and how it's led to the creation of new services. So go.
A couple logistics. In your packets that you got with when you signed in, there are notebooks and pens. So if you left that at home and you don't have them, share with your neighbors, get to know everyone. Talk to somebody you don't know and ask for a pen or a piece of paper. Like Joy said earlier, we often don't have a lot of resources in City Hall, so we're always finding things that we can grab and borrow from our friends. So please put that into practice right now. So does everyone understand the exercise, just real quick? So, real quick, that journey, one thing you'll notice, like, doesn't have to be pretty. We're not looking for pretty. You're just going to map the phases, thinking about inhabiting the savvy city analyst. You need to, and your task is conduct an analysis and write a report. So what do you do? How do you start that? And what are the steps that you take? And there's no real wrong answer here. What do you think that you would go through in order to actually do an analysis and then issue a report? What are the phases? Yep.
Can you provide like 3 examples of what a challenge might be? Like I'm trying to figure out. Is it paying the parking ticket?
Well, yeah, here's some examples. So let's say the city's thinking about converting to LED lights for street lamps. Is it the cost benefit worth it? It's an analytical question. This one's a silly one that someone actually did recently. The city's assessing, actually it's kind of an interesting one from an environmental perspective. How should they deploy modern sprinkler systems across the city to leverage the drought, coupled with how they should be thinking about planting going in the future? Here's one that was showcased yesterday. 911 calls have been increasing in San Francisco not exponentially, but precipitously. Why? And what should we do about it? Does that help?
So we make up a challenge that we're going to write a report about.
Yes. So you're analyst, you've accepted a challenge. You can make one up or take one that you have in your organization right now. There's a challenge. It's less about the challenge and it's more about what are the different phases you're going to go through in terms of how to research this issue and address this challenge and come up with a solution?
To do this, you actually don't have to, you can think of a research question if it helps you inhabit the question, but you'll notice for this journey, for example, interest is sparked. It's the first step. So I don't want to give away what the analysis journey. I don't want to bias you, but think about, well, what's the first thing that happens to start you on that journey of actually going and completing an analysis. And generally, for any analysis, there's probably some abstract steps, right? And so you don't necessarily have to go in and say, and then don't do the analysis. Please don't go and do the analysis on the 911. That's not what we're asking you to do. Say, what are the phases of actually creating an analysis as an analyst?
And if you need something closer to home, as someone who's recently done some home hunting, it was researching which neighborhood you wanted to live in, right? Like, how would you, and then you have to like debrief your partner about it. And that's who you're reporting out to.
Making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I go to my refrigerator.
Making the world's best peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I get the bread out of my refrigerator. Yes, I don't have it. I keep it in my refrigerator. I don't keep it in the bread box. I take 2 slices out. I take the peanut butter out. I take the jelly out. I slather peanut butter on one slice. I slather jelly on the other slice. I put bananas in there as well. And then I put those on top of each other, and then I eat it.
Though his larger journey is much more than that. How did he get the peanut butter? What we are trying to do with journey mapping is identify what are the additional services we could offer so that someone's journey will be more successful. Any more questions? We'll go around and help people too. Okay, everyone. I hate to cut off all the fun. See, isn't design fun? It's like being back in kindergarten. You get to scribble things. And again, we didn't have the ideal tools here, but just because you don't have the ideal tools and because you can't make something beautiful like those early examples is no excuse not to do it. All right, so if everyone can gather back, I know not everyone's done, but what we're going to do is we're going to ask 3 of the teams to, one, present the phases of their journey, and then talk about 1 to 3 insights they uncovered in the course of answering those questions. So not don't walk us through everything. Just what are the insights? What's 1 to 3 insights where in doing this and asking these questions, you had an epiphany. And so we would like someone from this team, a volunteer. We would like someone from this team and someone from this team to present that. So thanks. This team's first, I think. So I don't know. Who's your designated human?
We'll share. Go for it. All right. So we started by just kind of assigning or just looking at the general phases that we would kind of go through if we were an analyst tasked with analyzing something and creating a report. So it starts off with a question, which is kind of the task at hand. Goes on, so we have the question, what's the goal of the question, who's asking this, what's the timeline. So kind of assessing the environment that we would solve this question. Typically the question would need to be answered with some type of data. So we'd need to find the data, see if it exists, or see if we need to maybe work with somebody, so who might know more about this issue. And then even create some hypotheses around what we might be able to learn or what some potential solutions might be. So after we gather a bunch of this information, we go out and start talking to users and make sure that we're on the right track, get their feedback. So who cares about this, who requested this information, and just convene and get their feedback, get their buy-in, start to communicate this out and involve others. Because typically the thing that we publish, we want to make sure that it's on target. So we want to get a signal back as early as possible. After we meet with stakeholders and we know that we're on the right track, we go through and we start to kind of put our thoughts together and draft an analysis. We synthesize, analyze, kind of challenge and test and make sure these hypotheses are true. Again, circulate and review it out with users again, try to get their feedback, refine it down to a final draft, and ultimately publish and present it. And then all of this would be kind of an initial recommendation with the assumption that we will iterate on this. And that's it. We did kind of make notes about like very specific like what the perspective of a user might be through each one of these, but it got kind of deep really fast. But a lot of it is around kind of the ecosystem of data, vocabulary, just kind of common understanding. Like, anyway, I don't know if we need to get into that here, but this was our approach.
Great. So were there any insights that you guys came through on like what would be an awesome service to offer? It's okay if there's not. Understanding the journey is the first phase.
Yeah, so one thing that popped out to me was like, who knows about this? I think as an analyst, a lot of times you're a specialist in one single department, and it might be difficult to connect with other people that may know about that very niche thing. So to me, that seemed like an opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, I think a key word there was convening and bringing together people that are maybe cross-functional, approaching this from different points of view. And I think at a couple of key points here really is thinking about these audiences and these people and stakeholders and who cares about it, who knows about it, as opposed to operating in a silo, which sometimes happens.
Yeah, no, it happens all the time actually. And then we're going to ask this group over here to just take a minute, briefly describe the phases, and then 1 or 2 insights that you had around services you would offer our friendly, savvy analysts.
All right. So we had a very high level set of phases, which were gather the requirements of the report, gather the data, analyze the data, and interpret the data and write the report. So we just did a very high level look at this. But when we started asking how does this happen for gathering the requirements, we realized that an important step was going to be reaching out to the stakeholders and finding out who the audience for this report is to kind of get us started. For gathering the data, we need access to databases because we have a lot of them in the city, and then scraping data from publicly available sources for that. In terms of analyzing it, we said it takes the know-how, of course, the tools that we need to be able to do that. And for the interpretation in the report, we said that we needed some group discussion about the interpretation of the results, as well as some feedback built in with our leadership. So we'd have that feedback loop built in. Just to keep this really short and sweet, we did have some thoughts about areas where we could really spend some more time and some opportunities, and we realized a couple of the words that we came up with were decentralized. What was the other one that you had mentioned?
Well, it's really just kind of like, it's all based on relationships. People just kind of know where the source to get
You know who to talk
That's
to,
what
but
it
if
is,
you
yeah.
don't.
Yeah,
Exactly. And a lot of that is our office, and so we figured that there's a lot of opportunity to kind of democratize data and the knowledge and share that out with everyone so that it's readily available and other people can do it and not just have to keep coming back to our office.
Great. I was going to ask one more group to go through it, but I don't think we have time. So they're really interesting, the journey maps. So if you have time after this, take a moment to look around. I'm going to briefly take you through pieces of the journey map that we created and actually the services we ended up developing as a result. So we started with our journey, our analysis and report started with someone identifying a need for it. And this need could come from a lot of places. You can't read this, but it could be through program management. It could be a political agenda. Something sparked an interest for it. A complaint. Something happened and suddenly it's like, whoa, what are we doing? What should we do about this? We need someone to analyze this. A news item. News is big in government. It could be triggered by a news item. It could be a program evaluation. Well, that program's not working. What should we do about it? We need to analyze and come up with something else. It could be a requirement from the mayor's office. That happens a lot, like analyze this issue, right? So something prompts the need. There's a spark, a question emerges, and we have to analyze to figure out what the question is. And so from our perspective, we're like, okay, how do we support someone who's trying to answer a question right now? Well, we make data available, and in theory, we make it easy to explore. And how do they have access to it? Well, we have our portal and we have our data portal and our data hub. But we realized unless people knew about it, they wouldn't know about it, right? And so we thought, okay, how could we better support it? So we came up with the idea of something we called the Civic Starter Kit, which we'll be rolling out. We're like, oh gosh, we have to increase training and outreach for sure. We have to offer easier ways to explore our data. We have to introduce new touch points so people can become aware of us. We need to increase our search engine optimization on some of our pieces. We need to do more issue releases and things like that. And then we define the next phases as define the project plan and resource. I saw that on several of the ones around here. We identified what we call the discovery phase, where they're doing research, collecting data. It was sort of, we use the word gathering. I think Jason came up, he's like, they're gathering information. And then they do the analysis, and they develop the recommendations and findings, but that's sort of an iterative thing in that review and vetting phase, like who are they reviewing and vetting it with? And then they need to finalize, and then they need to publish. And then we're like, wait, once you publish, did it matter? What actually happened? And so that was a phase that we didn't feel. So we had lots of holes, a lot of holes. But out of this, we actually developed a series of services from doing this exercise. So what we learned and did, if they don't know, they don't know, right? That's when we realized we had to get a lot better at marketing communications. I'm terrible at that, so that's something we're working on. There are huge gaps in supporting the analysts in the city and many opportunities. Sometimes we don't know whose ballpark it's in, so we have to sort of navigate that. Things we decided to pick off. Something called Data Concierge, which is where we'll be connecting users internally with data sets, solving the knowledge problem. Share SF, which is around confidential data sharing, so it can support analysis and research. Data user peer groups, a couple of you got at that, this notion of who should I be talking to think about and how to address this problem? We've offered new trainings as a result of doing this exercise. And of course, we've increased marketing and our search engine optimization. Key takeaways. This should be a working document, not some beautiful specimen from the ones I showed you at the examples. Don't make it a work of art beauty. It should be a high-functioning, useful document. We repurposed and made this work for us. Are those the right questions for you? It's not a formulaic thing. Make it work. It should be generative. You should find yourself finding that the phases overflow from where you think your services start. Revisit regularly and prioritize. You don't have to do everything at once. Touch points matter. If no one knows, they don't use it. And your service or system is only a piece of the journey. A lot happens outside of that, and being aware of that can make you design a better service, and that's when you can start to leverage service blueprinting, which apparently we'll do a workshop on that someday. So thank you for going on this journey with us. We'll take questions, and thank you for participating. A touch point is essentially a channel where sort of users can either learn about or consume a service. So it could be a front desk counter, it could be your website, it could be your Twitter account. It's some place where you touch your users. Sounds a little creepy, but.
Can you go back a couple slides?
Oh, no, my bad. Oh, I mean, we can just publish this.
Yeah.
We're not.
I was
We're the open data program.
I was just wondering, have you had any experience of working with teams at locations and because a lot of things, I mean, the problem that I've had with whiteboards is often that, team members are in different locations and have you got any alternatives to electronic tools that you are thinking of?
Can you repeat the question?
I was just asking you, people in different locations, and how if everything's on whiteboards, are there other alternatives
So,
that people have been trying to this to do things in an online way?
Yeah, so essentially how to deal with remote teams. Off the top, we try to get everyone in a room. I do think it's better with that. But we use Lucid Charts, which would be a good way to get everyone on a webinar, and they have a sticky thing, so you can put stickies on there. In a dream world, we'd have not just whiteboards, but stickies and all sorts of fun. I go around with my design kit, actually, in the city. I have a box I carry around.
Real-time board and Stickies.io, and then Google Presentation or Draw are both collaborative.
Thoughts, questions, emotions?
So this group is, very innovative thinking, are obviously problem solvers, and even our group kind of got stuck on what do we call the phases. When you're dealing with an organization with people who have never really been asked to think like this, do you think it's helpful to maybe preload phases at a very high level so that they can even engage at that level, and you don't get stuck at, we can't even get something on the whiteboard because no one's ever thought like this before?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I'll be honest, we've done this with teams that have never done an exercise like this, and they immediately melt into it. I think this was an artificial, I don't know, I think people probably aren't analysts in here, and so maybe they don't know what that, so it's hard to define it. So it was a little unfair in that sense. And so I think having a facilitator who knows the methods to sort of throw out ideas well, where does this start? What precipitates it? Who can help do that and throw out things does it start with, a project plan? Is that where it starts from? And then people are like, well, no, it's before that, right? So having a facilitator who understands the technique is really important.
And you can reveal the process to them rather than try to explain it ahead of time, is ask those prompts, and then you start putting that up on the whiteboard, and they start to see this matrix come out, and they're like, oh, this makes sense, right? So that's the facilitation, and yeah, and I forget what the other part was.
Yeah, I mean, when we did the Sap Starter Kit journey, those folks had never done that ever. I didn't say, we're doing journey mapping today. I was like, so I want to experiment with just sort of, thinking through this. And then it was no problem. The ideas just came out. But they did know the area, so that helped.
Oh, that's the other thing, is one thing we did skip over a little bit is the persona. So, yeah, this is constrained, but yeah, we
we're being told to leave. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone.